This time on Shift Points, we're working on my 1986 C10 Squarebody, and I'm going to save you guys 40 bucks. Thanks for joining. Parking outside, and there was a ton of... He started this project. Found a piece of brass he's going to take. Alright everyone. Alright guys, if you've been following us on social media and different stuff, you have seen this truck. This is my 86 Chevrolet C10. I've had this truck for, gosh, almost 6 years, 5.5 years going on, 6 years now. 6 years in October, so I've had it for a while. Been a real slow process. I've been slowly kind of collecting parts for this truck. When the springtime, summertime, throughout that time, it's pretty much a daily driver. I drive it basically every day. It's got all these different colors on it. Some of it I've done, some of it is because we changed the front clip on the truck. When we first got it, it had a busted battery in the battery tray, and it had eat away the battery tray, the inner fender, and part of the outer fender on this truck. But when I bought it, it came with a front clip. So we swapped that a few years ago. So that's kind of why it's all these different colors. But this week, I'm going to try and jump into this truck and do a little bit to it because, like I said, it's a daily driver, and right at the end of last year, we had a few things go on with it that kind of happened right before I parked it. One being the valve that switches between the dual tanks stopped switching, and so I've got a replacement for that I'm going to put on it. The thermostat housing's been leaking, so I want to get that fixed. So those are the things we're going to work on this week on this truck. You guys remember last year I did a short on this truck, swapping out the actual tank switch itself. So that was the first place I started. I started running into issues with it not wanting to switch the tanks. So I did already go in and swap this switch here. So this is a brand new switch, so all that stuff is good. So that's why I'm chasing the valve, and I think that's probably what our issue is. And basically what's going on is whenever you hit the switch, this thing will actually just peg the gauge. It'll go all the way down to here and run all the way to the bottom. And basically what will happen if you're not paying attention, you do that and it runs down to here, it runs all the fuel out of the fuel lines, and then that's it. It stops going. So so that's kind of what's going on there, and that's why I'm going to go ahead and swap out this valve. So while this truck is not the lowest truck in the world by any means, it's all static dropped. It's not on airbags or anything. We actually bought this truck this way. It has low ring spindles on the front, and they've actually put a flip kit in the back. But it sets really perfectly. It's really what I want, so we haven't messed with it. But anytime you have to work on it, you have to break out these ramps that Dad made out of 2x4s, and it's a perfect step where you can actually get the jack under the air dam so that you can actually do something to this truck. Well guys, I'll tell you, sometimes it pays off to kind of do your yearly maintenance or for PM kind of stuff, preventative maintenance, right at the beginning of the season. Got this thing jacked up the back because it was going to give me a little bit easier access to the valve, and when I did, you can see right here, nice big old bulge on these not that old tires. Yeah, that sucks. These things are definitely not that old, but that could have been a bad deal, to be honest. So now, I guess I'll be giving old Eugene a call, see if we can figure out what we can do to get this thing pulled off. Maybe just I have a spare down at the house, probably just swap on it so I can drive it until we can get some other stuff here. But make sure you're checking your stuff, because you'll end up with things like that you had no idea were there. All right, now that we got that out of the way, we can get under here. I'll show you guys where this valve is. I've actually got under here already at one point just to kind of scope it out, and like I said, I had to get the truck jacked up so I could actually work on this thing. Well, let's ease under here, and if you come right here, it's actually right basically 3/4 of the way up on the passenger side fuel tank. You could see all these lines here, all the lines here that run into it, and there's a heat shield on it. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop that heat shield off get it out of our way so that we can kind of see what we're getting into. Just looking at the top of this thing, it looks like it's probably the original valve that was on the truck when it was built, which would explain why it doesn't work anymore. Well, I think it's safe to say that this is the original valve. So I got the heat shield pulled off of it, and you can see there, that does, there's a lot of stuff going on there. So I went ahead and got the plug unplugged here. I'll probably, while I have this off, these hoses are really not like, they look way bad, but they're really not that bad, but I'll probably go ahead and change them while I've got this off. So I gotta get me a good picture of this, make sure I get everything run back how it's supposed to be, and then pull these hoses off. And then there's 2 screws up here in the frame, which of course they screw into the top of the frame for some reason. So those are there, so I've got to get those out, and then I can pull this valve off, and everything will should come off pretty well. I got to get me a bucket under here, see if I can get as much fuel in my sleeve and in my armpit as I can. Well, after many minutes and, well, a lot of filth, did get it pulled off here. You can see this thing has seen better days. So this is the replacement valve for this thing. This is a U7000. That's the part number, the GM part number. This is a Delco part. There's also a U7001. Now the difference in these is $40 and these 3 rubber nipples. The valve itself is exactly the same. Has the same pinout, has all this. So I wanted to show this here to make sure it was clear. So this is part number U7000. This is the one that's like $84 on Amazon, and you can take that number, and it's listed as the valve for a single fuel tank truck. But all you got to do is pull those rubber grommets off, and when you pull them off, it's a dual fuel tank valve. And like I said, it's about $45 cheaper. So instead of the U7001, if you're working on a dual fuel tank truck, get the U7000, take the rubber grommets off, and you're set. Now, if you guys watch this channel very much, you know how much we hate these little spring clamps. But I don't have anything else other than those. So I put these back on. I've got 3 more to put on this, and this seems to just be like a vent, so it's not going to have any pressure on it. So I went ahead and got this made up with hose clamps. So that's ready to go. Again, I'm going to have a fortune in hose clamps. Now we've got the guys on top here are kind of a smaller size fuel line, and then a 5/16, and then we've got 3/8 here on the bottom for these connections here. It's pretty hard to mess it up because you can't put a 5/16 on the big ones. Anyway, so I think I looked at the diagram online. It looks like there's like, they call them like a primary tank and a secondary tank. So I'm guessing that's what the 2 different sizes are. But anyway, let's get back under here and see if there's any chance I can get all this stuff back together. Alright, this guy is back in now. All the lines are hooked up except for, there was a T-line I showed you guys earlier. This guy right here, it still has to go on those 3 open lines here, here, and here. So go ahead and get that put on. Then we're going to start this thing, make sure it's good, not leaking, before we put the heat shield back on and wrap it up. Alright, got everything hooked up. All I want to do is start this thing, make sure it doesn't pour a bunch of fuel out of it. Hopefully I have everything tight and connected. Hopefully. Maybe. Who knows? Let's find out. So I think both tanks are full, so it's hard to tell. It does seem to be fixed. I'm going to bring you guys in here into the truck itself and show you what it did do, or tell you what it did do, and then show you what it does now. So we start this thing back up. I did have a little leak. I got those hose clamps tightened up a little bit. That's all good. I'm going to leave the heat shield off of it for a couple days just so it's obvious if I have any other leaks, and then I'll put it back on here shortly. Dad went and took the tire down to Eugene to get him to swap it to one of my spares that I have, so that I can actually drive this thing, because I actually kind of need to use it today. Because both fuel tanks are full, it's a little hard to tell. But if I click it and engage it, and I heard it click back there, this doesn't peg out. It goes to a full tank like it should. And if I go back the other way, heard it click again, and again it's staying on full right now, but it's at least not pegging the gauge out and is actually switching, hopefully. So I'm gonna drive it today and do some checking. Once I get the gas down a little, I'll be able to tell better, and I'll pull the camera in and show you that once I've run the tank down some. Well, it is a few days later at this point, and the truck's been doing really good. You guys saw us taking it down the road. The switch is working. I've actually run the fuel out a little bit more. I'll show you guys. It'll be a little bit more drastic. Now it's sitting out here, but I went ahead and jacked it back up. I'm going to show you guys what we did to the collectors. I've had some issues with those coming loose in the past couple years, so I'll show you what we did to try and prevent that, and then show you the finished product of the valve itself, and then throw the heat shield back on, and then that'll all be wrapped up. So while we're under here, just ignore the massive oil leaks everywhere. But if we go right here, you can see these collector bolts. We've had issues with these things coming loose on both sides. Since I got the exhaust put on this, I put long tube headers on this truck, and they were way too long. They would scrub the ground. It was really obnoxious. So we put mid links on it, and then got the exhaust system fixed. And when we did that, these things, well, even with the long tubes, they would do this. So what we did is we actually tightened them up, got them sealed up good. Then we double nutted the collector bolts here, but also on top of that added some of the Vibratite that Dad has. It's like it stays kind of more malleable. Make sure that it's supposed to handle vibrations a lot more, so we're hoping maybe it'll help with this. It's high temp stuff too. So we double nutted them, locked this down. That should kind of take care of this, hopefully, because like I said, I've had to tighten these up a whole bunch since we did this. Now if we come back here to our main project here, this is the valve. Like I said, it's been running for a few days. Got everything put back together here. It has done really, really well. Everything looks good, and the only thing we've got left is to throw that heat shield back on. And there's 2 bolts in the frame, if you guys remember, and then 1 bolt right here, and that'll have that all back how it needs to be, and everything's gonna be great. But there's a lot of connections here, so it was good for me to leave this off for a couple days and make sure that it didn't have any leaks. Because I didn't want, of course, don't want a fuel leak. So I want to show you guys this. After we got the heat shield on, everything's good, everything is set on it. If we go over here and we switch our tanks, that's what I'm about to do. I depress that fully. You can see it goes up here. It's going to go to the full mark, and it gradually gets there and stops, instead of the very quickly pegging the gauge like it would do. So now we're on the left-hand tank and it is full, and if I go and depress this again, go to the right-hand tank, we're sitting at about 1/4 of a tank. So you can see gradually drops. So that right there is a pretty successful little job here. This truck, like I said, gets driven almost every day, so I've got to have it to where it can do this. There's only 13-gallon tanks on these trucks, so on each side, so having that little extra is nice. What I kind of do with them is I'll run one empty, switch to the other one, go ahead and fill the empty tank up, and then run the other one out. So I alternate back and forth on these. It helps a lot, and like I said, keeps me from having to be at the fuel station constantly. So if I do have to, I can run both of them out if I get in that situation, or if I decide to drive this thing to like Charlotte or whatever, I can, I've got plenty of fuel to get there and do it and not have to stop. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining this week. I hope you learned something. Hopefully, if you have a dual fuel tank truck, you can kind of take this, use it as a guideline on kind of how to go about it, and hopefully that little bit about the difference in part numbers save you a little money too. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, follow us on social media. You see all this stuff, all the different stuff that we're working on every single day. So do that, and we'll see you next week.